Mayor, how concerned are you about retaliation?
It's very concerning, and it's very disturbing. You know, if this ruling had gone the other way, I have no worries that folks who believed that Donald Trump, as I do, should not be on the ballot, would not be engaging in these kind of threats. And having been an elected official, I've experienced those. I'm sure you have experienced them as well. And they're certainly discomforting, but we all understand that we can't allow the bullies to win. I mean, Donald Trump, no matter what we do, does not accept that he loses. He is a perpetual loser. He's been losing his entire life, and yet he continues every time to say that that didn't happen. And now he's got his supporters, sadly, attacking people and doing these kind of anonymous threats. And there's no place for it. We shouldn't allow it, and we should certainly continue to stand up for what we believe in. He's not qualified to be president of the United States. He should be taken off the ballot, and people should accept what it is that our courts rule. But if the Supreme Court takes this up and the Supreme Court rules that Donald Trump is allowed to be on the ballot, I'll disagree with them. But I'm certainly never going to respond in any kind of way that Trump supporters have been responding in this direction.
Well, there was a process by which the Maine Secretary of State made her decision. You attended a hearing where both sides presented evidence to Maine Secretary of State. What did you make of Trump's defense in that hearing?
You know, it was very similar to what he did in Colorado when he brought forward, number one, trying to say that Secretary Bellows had no right to make this decision. That was clearly wrong. Then attempted to claim that it wasn't an insurrection and Trump did not engage or incite it. That is clearly wrong. All of us saw it. And then perhaps the largest part of the debate was around the 14th Amendment, whether it applies to the president. And, you know, it's just impossible to believe that the drafters of the 14th Amendment, Section 3 would have said, you know, if you run for county commissioner and violate your oath and you commit insurrection, you can't run for office again. But somehow, if you are the president of the United States, the most powerful person in the country, and you commit insurrection against us, oh, yes, by the way, you can run again. It goes against both the letter, the intent, the spirit, and it's simply an absurd argument.
As you know, Trump is going to stay on the ballot throughout the appeals process. Does this still feel like a win to you?
Yeah, for sure. But, you know, it's not about winning or losing. It's about upholding our Constitution. And so in the sense that we are, you know, ensuring that our Constitution is interpreted and is enforced in the way that it was intended is the most important part of this. And so, yes, I mean, look, when the first judge in Colorado deemed Donald Trump as an insurrectionist, as a finding of fact, when she ruled that way, it's clear that there's now been a court that has ruled this, right? There has been an opportunity for both sides to make their case. Donald Trump came forward and said, I was not an insurrectionist. Those who brought forward that challenge said he was. The judge weighed all that evidence after weeks and weeks of testimony, and she determined that he was an insurrectionist. The Colorado Supreme Court has now upheld it. So, you know, look, those who are saying that Donald Trump needs to be convicted of this crime before he can be held to the constitutional standard, number one, that's wrong, a wrong constitutional interpretation. But number two, he's had his day in court and he lost twice and now a third time.
The Supreme Court is likely to take up the issue of Trump's eligibility and ultimately issue a definitive ruling here. But how optimistic are you about that ruling?
Well, I don't know if optimistic is the word that I would use, but I think I am hopeful that the court will put aside their partisanship. And I hope that the court will put aside the fact that three of them were put there by Donald Trump. I hope that Clarence Thomas will recuse himself. Obviously, his conflicts around his wife's involvement in January 6th mean that he should. But regardless of whether he does, I hope the court, you know, there really is only one way to look at the 14th Amendment. The president, it applies to the president. There really is only one way to look at January 6th. It was an effort by Donald Trump to block the peaceful transfer of power. When you take those two black and white issues, there's only one conclusion you can lead to. The Section 3 of the 14th Amendment means this person cannot hold that office. let's not disenfranchise Republicans in primaries throughout the country and have them vote for somebody who ultimately can't actually serve.